Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're just going to open the doors here to let all the attendees come on in. So as we're waiting, if you are already in, we would love to hear where you are from. So if you would go to the questions section and go ahead and type in your name and where you're from. That way we can just let everybody come on in and see where everybody's coming from for today's event. We have a big crowd coming in already. So we have Rebecca from Arizona, Monica from Massachusetts, we have Jessica from California, Bob from Ohio, Christy, Ohio, James, Rhode Island. We've got Dallas coming in, Corey from Rhode Island, Sadie from Maryland, Syracuse, New York coming in, Lee. There we go. We got somebody else from Texas, Connie from Ohio. Got some people from Louisville, Stewart from Atlanta. Got about another minute before we get started. BJ from North Carolina. This is great. We're getting people from all over. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your day today with us. Okay, for those of you that are just coming in, if you want to just go to the questions section, click inside the box and put your name and where you're from. And we'll just keep doing that. Got more people coming in. Brandy, Sandra from Maryland, Evelyn from Oregon, Angie, we got Jory from Illinois, got South Carolina. We saw somebody from Hawaii come in, Minnesota, Indiana, Tennessee, Chicago, Boise, Idaho, Abby from Kentucky. This is great. Jen from Arizona. All right, well, thank you everybody for coming on in. I'm going to go ahead and get the presentation started today. So hold on, let me just click inside of here. All right. All right, it's time to start. Okay, welcome everybody to Operation Parents webinar, Marijuana, the Teen Brain and the Impact on School Performance. We are so excited to have you joining us today for the 60-minute webinar. Our presenter today is Dr. Aaron Weiner. He's a licensed clinical psychologist and director of addiction services at Linden Oaks Behavioral Health. I would also like to thank Sam, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, for connecting us to Dr. Weiner, who is a member of their Science Advisory Board. My name is Mary Beth Uberti, and I'm the Director of Program Development at Operation Parent, and I will be on the controls today for this event. For those of you that are new to Operation Parent, we are a nonprofit, parent-driven organization providing comprehensive prevention education, support resources for parents, caregivers, and organizations responsible for raising and guiding teens and preteens. Before we get into the content, though, I would like to go over a few of the features of the GoToWebinar panel so you can fully participate in the session. First and foremost, that grab tab at the very top of your screen from the control panel, it's an orange box with an arrow. If you click on that, that'll minimize the control panel. So if you want to click on it to minimize it, you can see the full screen. If you want to click on it again, open it up. For now, if you could just go ahead and open up the control panel so you can view all the features. For everyone attending, you will be muted during this presentation. We would, however, like to hear from you via the question section. So about halfway down the control panel, you will see this section. You can send both questions and comments here. There are 3 panels. The top panel will show you any questions you've already posted. And below that is another light blue panel where you can type in your questions and send them to us directly. You can send us questions anytime during this live webinar. All questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So just know that this is a 60-minute event. Questions will be answered at the end. Once the presentation has completed, Dr. Weiner will stay on and we will answer and we will close at 3 o'clock. Handouts. Also, you will notice that section in your panel. There are 5 handouts for today, and about an hour prior to this event, if you were registered, you have already received the handouts in that email. Keep in mind, you can download them while we are in this presentation. So if you are on your cell phone viewing this, I know you cannot download them while you're viewing through the cell phone. Just go ahead and look for that email. But if you're here now and you just want to download them, just click in that handout section and you can begin the download process. Just understand, once I close out the live webinar, the download will no longer be available. You will have to go to the email to get the handouts. As I mentioned also, we are recording this presentation, and this recording will be sent to you tomorrow afternoon. I know we get a lot of questions about certificate of attendance or CEUs. At this time, we do not have CEUs available, but we will send you a certificate of attendance, and it will be attached to the follow-up email, which you will receive tomorrow. If you were listening to this recording and you want a certificate of attendance, please send me an email at marybeth@operationparent.org after you have viewed the recording, and I will go ahead and send you the certificate of attendance. So also at the end of the event, there will be a short survey sent directly to you after the webinar. It'll take about 2 minutes to complete, and if you have the time, we would appreciate your feedback. So with that, I would like to turn the webinar over to Dr. Weiner, and just hold on for just 1 minute while I make the adjustment. Okay, Dr. Weiner.
All right, thank you, Mary Beth. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the introduction. I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit about marijuana, about the industry, and what it's important to know about the substance as it relates to developing adolescent minds. As was mentioned, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm the director of an addiction service line at a hospital system in the west suburbs of Chicago. I'm also a board member of the Society of Addiction Psychology, and I take evidence-based approaches to both practice and education for healthcare providers, for the public, extremely seriously. I think right now we're living in an age where there's a lot of facts and alternate facts flying around. And I think that actually having a firm grasp on what a fact is and how it relates to peer-reviewed evidence-based literature is critical. So I think we talked mostly about this slide already. I am on the Science Advisory Board of Smart Approaches to Marijuana. SAM is a national group that's opposed to another big tobacco. So essentially looking at the industry around marijuana, really trying to push back against that. They're a fantastic organization. If anyone wants to know more about them, www.learnaboutsam.org. So in terms of our objectives for today, learning about today's marijuana as a substance and an industry and how both impact our youth. Second, how marijuana impacts the teen brain and school performance. 3, the effects of legalization and the increase in risks to teens. And lastly, some key take-home points that parents really could use to know. So first, to start off, what is marijuana? So it is a plant with 500 chemical compounds and 100 different cannabinoids. The two that we hear the most about are THC, that's the psychoactive component in the part that gets you high, and cannabidiol, or CBD, and that's actually the one that's more closely related to therapeutic benefit. A lot of times folks confuse cannabis and cannabinoids, and that's a really important distinction when we talk about how this influences the body and the mind. Cannabis and marijuana, that is the plant. Cannabinoids are just constituent parts. The THC binds to, in the brain, CB1 receptors, and this picture shows where they're concentrated, those receptors, most. And you can see down here in the bottom left, the medulla. That's why we see the vomiting suppression. Some of the movement areas, basal ganglia and cerebellum, the higher cognitive function in the cerebral cortex, appetite stimulation, the hypothalamus, learning, memory, and stress in the hippocampus, and some in the spinal cord, which has to do with numbing pain, amongst other things. So the way it works, not really a mystery, right? It binds to where the receptor sites are, but that's why we see both the intoxicating effects and, in some cases, the therapeutic effects. It is, however, the most used substance in our society right now behind alcohol and tobacco, and there's a number of forms and routes of administration for this. There's the traditional leaves, flowers that we're used to thinking about when it comes to marijuana. Then we've got edibles, and I'll have a few more pictures of these soon. This here, you can see that this is a medical use only bag of gummies that's in a clearly child-proof safe package. And then here's an extract. Extracts can be up to 93, 98% pure THC, and they're actually one of the fastest growing markets in Colorado and other commercialized states. Sometimes it's easy to think that marijuana is just this one, flowers, leaves, but really that's not the way things are going. We've got these edibles with a lot of milligrams of THC in them. We're seeing the extracts as well. You can smoke them in both joints and blunts. You can, of course, also use a bong where it passes through water before you inhale it. Vape pens, this is another big issue right now, is that there's a lot of kids vaping right now. It's a very fast growing trend. And part of the issue with that is, although many of them start by vaping nicotine, it's not very much of a stretch to switch over to a cannabis extract, that wax or shatter that I was showing you on the last page. So if you hear about kids or hear the word dabbing, this is actually dabbing, where you have the extract. You can see it down there in the bottom of a modified bong, and you heat it up with a torch. But you can actually, this used to be the way that people would dab or use extracts, but now you can just use vape pens, and actually you can just go on YouTube and see ways to modify a jewel to accept an extract. So it's really lowered the barrier for entry, and that's a very concerning trend. Something we'll talk a bit more later is that the higher the THC content of something, the greater the chance that it has a negative effect on the brain and the body. And these extracts are literally designed to be as high potency THC as they can be. They really blow regular flowers out of the water. And I'll show you more of those numbers soon. So in terms of what we're seeing in states that have fully commercialized, here there's Cat and Munch, Chronic Toast Crunch, and Fruity Loops. Here's cakes, brownies, candy bars. And you can see just, this is probably still a copyright violation if we really were to look into it, but they're just doing slight riffs on names. There's some Rice Krispie treats. There's maple syrup that's been infused with THC. And part of the issue with this is if you look at these, they're not marketed at 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds, right? These are marketed at young people. And that's intentional. The way the addiction market works, kind of jumping ahead in slides here, but 90% of addictions start in adolescence. And so if you are in the business of addiction, you've got to target the young. It's the only thing that makes sense to do, right? You hook them while they're young, and then they buy from you potentially for the rest of their life. And so, I mean, you look at these. If you've got pre-diabetes, this is going to push you over the edge, right? I mean, this is not angled at an older crowd. And when we think about the market and where all of this is going, it's really important to remember the systems at play around the substances themselves. So in terms of the variability of concentration, there's a very high variability of the THC that someone's going to get. And this is something that's been increasing over time. So in 1995, and actually well before this, THC was about 3 to 4%. A Woodstock pot joint had about 3 to 4% THC in it. By 2012, the seizures off the street, and this graph is from a publication by Nora Volkow. She's the director of NIDA. By 2012, it was up to 12%. By 2016, it was up to 16%. And as I'll show you very soon, you can barely buy anything these days under 20%, and some go up to even as high as I think 30%, 28, 30%. And so if you're talking about a 28% THC joint, you are literally talking about taking, let's call it 7 to 8 woodstock joints, lighting them all up at the same time and smoking them at the same time. And that is one joint of today's pot. So I think a lot of parents, when they think about marijuana, or if they're minimizing the impact of smoking, they're thinking back to maybe their youth, or they're thinking back to their time in college, and what it was like for them. And it's critical to know that even just the flowers these days, even just the buds, are far more concentrated with THC than they used to be. And the concentrates and the extracts can go far, far higher than that. Lastly, it is an addictive substance, and this is something you hear. This is one of those things where you hear that there's a quote unquote debate about whether or not marijuana is addictive. There is absolutely no debate about this whatsoever. Actually, people say that there's a debate because it serves their interests. These stats are straight from the CDC. Approximately 30% of active users, that means daily or nearly daily, have a substance use disorder. 1 in 10 adults who uses will develop a disorder, and 1 in 6 adolescents. It is actually, I run a series of treatment centers. It is the second most common substance we see used by our patients. So the idea that it's not addictive is simply and patently untrue. We have a documented tolerance and withdrawal syndrome from it. It is physiologically addictive. My hunch about why some people like to push this narrative and why others believe it is that it's addictive kind of in the way that alcohol is addictive, where it's not like you have a drink and then all of a sudden you're drinking and drinking and drinking and you've got an addiction just from once or just from a couple times, kind of like you hear sometimes happening with heroin or with methamphetamine or sometimes even with cocaine. It takes a little while. You have to use it habitually. It has to serve a purpose in your life. It has to be something regular for you. But just like alcohol is far and away the most used substance, right? And marijuana is creeping up on that, and cigarettes. Marijuana, THC, it works the same way. If you use it for a long enough time, a significant proportion of people will develop an addiction to it. And it's very important if someone misunderstands that to help correct that understanding. So something you hear a lot, and something you hear a lot from kids, right? Isn't it medical? Isn't it good for you? Isn't it already legal? How can it be that bad? Or it's not as bad as blank, fill in substance that they consider as stronger. You hear that a lot, and that's actually a narrative, that the therapeutic benefits, the medical, something that we're hearing about a lot, and it's actually being used as a tool to help, to be honest with you, misinform people about what it is and is not good for, and lower perceived risk. So we know that as perceived risk of a substance goes down, use tends to go up. And for a long time, there's been a campaign to lower the perceived risk of marijuana to help soften people up to the idea of creating a commercial market. So I want to talk a little bit, because this is something that a lot of kids are confused about the facts behind medical marijuana, what it actually is in most states, and what the evidence actually is behind it. So despite that we call it medical, it has not been approved by the FDA, nor is it prescribed or dispensed like medicine. So examples of medicines. Medicines are the same everywhere you get them. They pass through rigorous safety standards, which are there to protect the public. They're prescribed in a specific way. And we actually have medications that are THC and CBD based, and they look like this. We've had Marinol, this one on top, since the 1970s. It's synthetic THC, not to be confused with synthetic cannabis, which is not actually THC at all, and that can be a whole nother topic. But sometimes you'll hear things that synthetic cannabis is legal and causes all this terrible stuff, but regular, natural, plant-based is not. Why is that? Well, those people are confusing synthetic cannabis, which is a separate chemical sprayed on random plant matter, with synthetic THC, which is THC. Epidiolex down here on the bottom left, this just passed through the FDA and was approved. It's plant-based cannabidiol procedures. And when I say plant-based, I mean plant-based, right? So this is probably actually coming from hemp. Hemp is part of the cannabis family, but hemp has little to no THC in it and very high CBD concentration. So that's generally where you'll get CBD from. Marijuana, again, has the THC as the stronger component, which is the psychoactive part. But that is passed through the FDA. You can get that in this country now. And Sativex there on the right, that one's a 1-to-1 THC cannabidiol spray, which is being studied for multiple sclerosis. So these are medications. These you cannot get at a medical dispensary because they are medicine. They are a pharmaceutical, right? So you have to get them from a pharmacy. Part of the reason why I struggle with the word medical marijuana is because medical implies pharmaceutical. It makes us think about the field of medicine, and that looks very different. So what we currently have in most states is a system where you buy what you like from a dispensary, using it however you want. So I'm located in Illinois, so I'm going to use it as an example, but most states are very similar to what I'm about to describe to you. So here in Illinois, basically the way it works is you get a physician to fill out a card that says that you have a qualifying condition. And that's one of 40 conditions here. It says that you can then go buy medical marijuana, and then you go to the store and you can buy whatever you want from that store up to 2.5 ounces every 2 weeks. And for those of you who aren't familiar about how that converts into joints, that is literally enough for 140 joints every 2 weeks of that high potency marijuana. That's 10 joints every single day you can buy. That's part of why we're seeing it actually in our schools and on the streets, is because you can purchase far more than anyone would ever actually have to use. And the card is good for a year before it needs to get renewed. So to put that system in perspective, if we were doing this with medicine, this would be like if you went to the doctor and the doctor said, you have strep throat, you need an antibiotic. And they gave you a card that basically just said, this person can buy antibiotics. And then you went to the pharmacy and they said, oh, great, you've got the card. Congratulations. What would you like to buy? Azithromycin, cephalexin, doxycycline? Your choice. How much do you want? That's up to you. Don't go too crazy. That is literally the system we have right now for medical marijuana. And it's shocking that we're attaching the word medicine to it. And patient protections there are very, very poor. Another aspect of this that's really important to recognize, and this pertains directly to adolescents, is I'm not sure how many, and I can't see a show of hands because we're on a webinar right now, that have actually looked at what's being sold. I'd like to actually show you because I think it's important to see. It's easy for me to tell, but I want to actually show, and we're going to actually look both at medical dispensaries here in Illinois by where I work, and then also from the largest dispensary chain in Colorado, just as a compare and contrast. So I'm going to flip over to the web browser now, and Mary Beth, please let me know if you don't see this. But what you're looking at here is our Naperville dispensary. And as I scroll down, I'd like you to just look at the names of these products. Ask yourself, does this look like medicine to you? Alien Rock Candy, Durban Poison, Ghost Train Haze, Bio Jesus, Gorilla Glue number 4, Stardug Guava. OG18, I'm sure some of you in the audience know what this stands for, but OG actually stands for Original Gangster. Now part of the issue here, right, is this is not marketed at 65-year-old women with MS, right? Not even a little bit. And that's intentional, right? You could call this whatever you wanted to call this. You don't have to name it this way. But it's done on purpose because they're trying to appeal to a certain market. That market is young people, and that market are people who might already be using cannabis. If you even look at how these things are described, if we go up to the top, you know, like the number 1 rated cannabis cup winner of 1996 is the love child of, you know, we don't really describe medicine that way normally, and I can pretty much guarantee you that it didn't win the cannabis cup because it was good for improving short-term sleep outcomes, right? You know, it got there because it got you high. I think actually there's one somewhere down here that says it won a High Times Cup, you know, and so it's literally how they're being marketed. If we go over to this other one that we've got in town, this is where we need to be. This is one that I've got a little bit south of me. They actually show concentrations of marijuana in these products. So let's open BioJesus for a second. So what this is showing here, THCA, and I've heard that there are some questions about this. So THCA is a molecular precursor to THC. When you heat it over 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which you will do if you light it on fire, which you will do if you vape it, and you will do if you're cooking it in something. for the most part. It converts to THC at a rate of 88%. So what we're looking at here, BioJesus, is about 25% THC. If we open another one, and I have not previewed these, we're just going to see what they are. Death Star is here's another 26% THCA. Let's try Gobstopper. What's in this one? 23%. So here's another original gangster. Let's see what's in this one. Whoa, holy cow! All right, so this one's going over 30. So this is a lot, right? And part of the issue with this as well, this one doesn't even have any CBD in it at all. These get you very, very high. And the medical studies that we have, the therapeutic studies that show what it's actually good for, not only do a lot of them actually just use cannabinoids, so they just use THC because you can't have variability in the research, right? You have to have a consistent product. So you're generally not smoking it. And if you are, actually, the grows where we can get it for study, the highest percentage I think they grow there is 8%. So you're already going way over anything that we've ever studied. There's really no reason to do this. To put this also in perspective, in Amsterdam, where the government turns a blind eye to what they call soft drugs, and only pay attention to the hard ones, they draw the line between hard and soft THC at 15%. Hard THC is 15% and up, and they group that in the same category as methamphetamine and heroin. You cannot even buy anything that low in dispensaries, in medical dispensaries. And again, this is very consistent. If we go to this next tab here, these are extracts. So these are the same things that you're buying in Colorado. You can actually get these in our medical dispensaries here. And this one's got 83% THCA. Again, the higher the THC, the more addictive it is, the more the negative outcomes. And there is no research I'm aware of in peer-reviewed medical journals to show positive effects or anything that remotely resembles a good risk-benefit ratio for using marijuana or THC extracts like this for anything. Yet there's these loopholes. And so I don't know, we've got a lot of different states represented here. Try looking up your local dispensaries and see what they're selling there. You will likely find something very similar. The way these laws are constructed allow for these sorts of activities to happen. Now I mentioned let's compare to Colorado, right? Because Colorado allows, of course, for recreational sale. How does that differ, right? And what are they marketing here again? Live, wax, Alien Jack, etc. So here is their biggest dispensary. I looked this up online, Native Roots. And take a look, right? Alien OG, Blue Dream, Bruce Banner #3. This looks very familiar because it's literally the same thing. Actually, in Illinois, the first bill that got presented gave medical dispensaries the first year of sale to the general public all to themselves. And they don't have to switch anything. In fact, if you look at these symbols, it says medical, recreational. Look through all these. Let's go to the next page. I mean, it's literally the same symbol for both, right? They're saying that something's medical is also recreational. Could you imagine just for a second if we were doing this with, like, say, Xanax? Like, some people misuse Xanax, but imagining that all of a sudden said, well, let's just sell this recreationally because people can get high off of it, and then we could. It's kind of crazy to look at, but you look at these symbols. It's pretty much that way for all of these. Here are edibles that they sell in Colorado, and you're going to see very similar things, right? Sour gummies, hot cocoa, Keef Cola, and again, these absolutely are aimed at the young. Here's taffy of various types. It's also the sort of thing. Could someone necessarily tell this? Could a child tell the difference between this and a regular candy if it was out of the wrapper? Probably not. Probably not. We actually, I think it was about a year ago now, had a situation at the high school across the street from one of our offices where 13 kids were sent to the emergency department because they unknowingly consumed THC-laced gummy bears and became very anxious, very agitated, had no idea what was going on. So it's a big issue. And again, part of the reason why I want to make sure that everyone sees this is because the industry is consistent. There are national groups promoting the advancement of this. There are hundreds of thousands of dollars being invested at the federal level and at state levels. There's a lot of reasons why people are saying that this is moving forward. But at the bottom of all of it, and we're not going to go too deep into all of that today, we're going to talk more about the medical impact and the health impact. But at the root of all of it is money, because as much, there have been studies that show, and actually even Moody's released a report saying that states don't actually make money off of this. They might only make a little tiny bit, but the cost of generating that revenue in house fires and car accidents, in absenteeism from work, and in emergency department visits without insurance, actually more than offsets what you're going to make. There's a lot of talk about revenue, but there's not a lot of talk about the cost of producing it. But the people who don't care about that cost, they don't care about the cost of society, are the people who sell it. It's far more than we make off of taxes. And these are the people buying lobbyists and really pushing it at all levels of government to move this forward. So that said, what is it actually good for? Because again, it's important that we know all sides of this. It is good for these things, although some of them are just for cannabinoids, not for everything. An example, I need to add this to the list, but actually between this and coming up on a slide in a second, talks about seizures. Seizures, obviously, because Epidiolex passed through the FDA, is you can treat seizures with cannabidiol. That does not mean you can treat seizures with cannabis. Whenever I see Sanjay Gupta write something on CNN about how marijuana is good for this, that, and the other thing, it's very irritating because it's a very irresponsible portrayal. The National Academy of Sciences released a 550-page document with everything we know from reputable literature, because much like big tobacco before it, big marijuana produces its own research. The industry produces its own evidence, which is, again, a very dangerous thing to be having happen and then messaged out to the public. But there is actually a lot of peer-reviewed, good, solid clinical data that we can look at. The NAS report really summed a lot of it up, and these were the outcomes that they said it was good for. In contrast, though, in Illinois, it's approved by the legislature for 40 conditions. And again, when kids say, isn't it medical? Remember, no, physicians did not sign off on this. There's no way to pass this through the FDA. So instead, they went to legislators who are not physicians or doctors and said, we want to call this medicine and sell it to the public. And they got them to do it. Or there was a ballot box initiative that bypasses things entirely for recreational. But it's not passing through medical bodies. So again, if kids are thinking that doctors say this is okay, we really need to put the brakes on that. Here is a list of all of the different conditions right now in Illinois that are on our list. And this is a lot longer than those 5 things that are 5 or 6 things that you saw on the other slide. It's a really big problem. From that National Academy of Sciences report, here is a list of things that they said that there is insufficient evidence to support or refute. And if you look down that list, again, different states have different laws, but you're going to see a lot of these on those laws. We have about 5 of them here in Illinois that there's basically no evidence to support. Glaucoma is another one that we heard about in the very beginning. Actually, the American Glaucoma Society says on their website, and you can look it up, this was a copy-paste, that they preclude recommending this drug in any form for the treatment of glaucoma at the present time. It basically sends your intraocular pressure on a roller coaster ride. It doesn't actually help anything. And because of the negative side effects of marijuana, they say shouldn't do it. So my take home from all of this that I really want to make sure that you saw was that this is an industry. It profits off addiction. It capitalizes on public confusion, and it targets young people. And that is a critical aspect of this. Again, the young folks are customers for life. Think cigarettes, right? It's the same deal. And so there's such a huge chasm between general public understanding of marijuana. Most people don't realize that it's 7 to 8 times as strong, the flowers alone. They don't know much about extracts, about vaping. They haven't heard of any of these things. And the industry loves that. They prey off of that, and they love the fact that kids can spout off things like, isn't it natural? It's just a plant. How bad can it be? It's not as bad as fill in the blank, right? As if that means like heroin, cocaine, as if that means that you should do it. So knowing the system is critical, and that's the system that we have right now around marijuana. So let's get back to the substance itself. It is a particularly bad idea for kids, and I want to talk about why on a number of different levels. So first off, kids are at increased risk for addiction. You might remember from that previous slide that it was 1 in 10 adults and 1 in 6 kids. There's a few different reasons for that, but the biggest is that your brain isn't actually done growing. Your brain doesn't stop maturing until between 25 and 30 years old, depending on the study that you look at. And actually the last part to develop is that area in the front of all of those brains that stays dark. And those are your frontal lobes. Those are the sections that are involved in executive functions, planning, abstract thought, judgment, decision making. That all comes last. And so it's much easier for kids to fall into the trap because literally they're not playing with the same deck of cards that adults are. You know, they just aren't fully equipped. And so that's part of the reason why, again, 1 in 10 versus 1 in 6, you go for the young people. That's why they're targeted. There are a number of negative academic and vocational outcomes when kids use marijuana. So breaking it down in high school, we've seen we have a lot of research, lower grades, higher dropout rates, and increased school disciplinary problems the more a kid is smoking cannabis. So it's not a benign substance. It's not something that just doesn't matter. Even occasional use can have an effect, but the more they use, the worse it gets. Why does this happen? Some of it, the reason why it occurs, it may be social and functional, maybe cognitive, or maybe both. So what that means is research has found some of this is if you're hanging out with people who aren't doing their homework or you're missing classes. That's more of the social functional side where you're not around people who are going to support you for achievement, or you're just missing classes, you're missing things, you're not studying as much. Some of it may be cognitive. And we'll have more on this on a few slides later, but absolutely there are short-term and long-term residual effects on cognition from using marijuana. And so these two things combine, right, in terms of the cognitive effects and the social functional effects to make it harder for kids to achieve in high school. What we found in the research is that earlier initiation of use equals worse outcomes. So if a kid is starting to smoke at age 13, that's much worse than at 16, which is worse than 18, which is worse than 28. Greater frequency also leads to worse outcomes. So the more someone smokes, the worse things get. So in terms of college, we have seen essentially exactly the same thing. Increased chance to skip class, lower GPA, which has led to potentially a longer time to graduate. And it can be progressive, right? So if you're already falling into the culture of, I hang with the people who smoke, I hang with the people who get high, I am a person who gets high, right? As kids are forming their identity through high school and in college, it's very easy for this to snowball. And decreased lifetime earning potential. So in the long run, there are studies that show that whatever you make, the more you smoke, the less you're going to make long term in your life for a number of different factors. But basically, it just takes your overall trajectory, your educational and vocational trajectory, and, well, no pun intended, but I guess it works, but it blunts it, right? So instead of whatever upward slope it would be, it levels off a bit. Brain morphology changes. So this is a big deal too. So as we grow, our brain grows in certain areas and prunes in certain areas to reach its fully adult shape. And the issue is that we found through brain MRI, fMRI studies that your brain does not grow where it's supposed to grow and does not prune where it's supposed to prune in the same way when you smoke cannabis consistently from adolescence. And that leads to residual impairment in memory, processing speed, and decision making. I want to show you a couple of graphs that speak to this. So this one was a review that was looking at neuroanatomic alterations in cannabis users over time. And basically everything that has red on it are studies that showed significant differences in them. So you can see here the hippocampus, the parahippocampus, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex. They're all important, but that's a really important one. Insula temporal pole, that's for dosage, that we see dosage affected there. The one below that has to do with duration, and then age of onset as well. This is just one study. There's a number that I could show, but essentially when you are using it in higher doses, higher duration, and starting earlier, you can actually impact the way your brain just straight up grows. This is another study. This just came out actually this year, a few months ago. It was I'll share one of the punchlines from this. One of the take-home points actually was that they were comparing differences between cannabis and alcohol long-term. This was a longitudinal study on adolescent cognitive development and substance use. They actually found that use of marijuana had a worse effect on kids' cognitive performance over time than alcohol does. So when you hear things like it's not as bad as alcohol and we're fill in the blank, that's a very debatable statement to make, and this study actually shows the opposite. But basically what you're looking at here is that the red lines are the ones that are the most use, the highest pattern of use, and blue is no use. And on the graphs like this one on top, where you've got red on top and blue on bottom, you want to be lower. Lower is better. Those are number of errors. On the ones over here, here's a score on a perceptual reasoning task. Again, it's the other way around. Blue's on top. But you can clearly see, right? Blue, no use is always the best, and red is always the worst, and green is sometimes tied. So we have a lot of information about this over time. One aspect that I think is important to mention, just because some people have been pushing back against this statement and there's some legitimacy to it, there is now what I would call mixed evidence about whether or not IQ actually is lost from, like direct IQ is lost from smoking marijuana over time as a kid. Previously, there still is published research showing between a 5.5 to 7.5 point IQ loss. Now there are some studies showing that may or may not be due to other factors surrounding the use. So kind of like earlier when I mentioned if you're skipping class, that lowers your grade. And that's how marijuana may lower your grade. There may be something similar going on with the IQ, but the jury is still out about that. Regardless, the slide I just showed you is 100% legitimate information, and we've seen these impairments, enduring impairments and replicated impairments in these different areas. So we have evidence through research of impaired judgment, including risky sexual behavior. So when you're high, when you're stoned, you're less likely to make good decisions, and then also, and those can be sexual in nature, absolutely. And then psychotic breaks. This is something that I think some people think are just made out there to scare you, but it is a real legitimate thing. We probably get a handful, I'd say maybe 5 to 10 people every year who have had a psychotic break because of their marijuana use. And they can either be transient or persistent. Sometimes they come and they go. Other times they stick around, and someone's developed schizophrenia. There were some people who like to say, well, how do we know they wouldn't have developed that anyway? Maybe they were just predisposed, and so how do you know it was the marijuana? It was just in about 3 months ago, a study that came out that was one of the first to really longitudinal studies start to look at that causal link between they smoke marijuana, therefore they develop psychosis, not they would have done it anyway, and maybe folks with psychosis are more likely to smoke. So we've kind of already known this from just anecdotal experience in our centers, but it's starting to, the research is starting to catch up with that as well. But what we know is that higher percentage THC increases the chances of these psychotic breaks. And those concentrates that we were showing you at the medical dispensaries and then also that are at recreational dispensaries, these are being published about literally in schizophrenia journals. Right? So a little dabble do ya, a case report of neuro and cardiotoxicity, cannabis-induced psychosis associated with high-potency wax dabs. We don't want our kids using anything that's being published about in schizophrenia journals. We just don't, much less selling it out of things that we're calling it medicine. It's a huge issue. It's a huge disconnect between research and what people understand. And drug driving. So this is another really important aspect that there's a lot of misinformation about. I saw a study put out by the Washington State DEA where they were doing a retrospective about what's been going on in their state. And something that was very concerning was that they found that 62% of drivers said that they thought that you could drive high and it did not impair you. And that is just simply not true. I'll show you one graph of it here on this presentation. This is a deep rabbit hole we could dive down, but We know that it impacts your lateral control, ability to go left and right, your ability to judge speed, your decision-making acuity. There are a number of things that we know that it does. And actually, one of the big issues, I'm not sure if this is on a later slide, so I'll talk about it now. We don't actually have a equivalent of a 0.08 for marijuana. It's been hypothesized that 5 nanograms per liter in your blood is that equivalent, but there have been numerous studies that show that it's actually not accurate. You can have 1 nanogram, even 0 nanograms sometimes, and still show impairment because THC is very lipophilic. That means it's attracted to fat, and your brain is very fatty. So unlike alcohol, where if it's not in your blood, it's not in your brain, THC works differently. And so there are huge questions around enforcement in terms of preventing drug driving, but the fact that about 2 out of 3 people in Washington state don't acknowledge that it's even impairing is a big problem. So here's another aspect of this. I want to highlight how this works in the blood, in particular to show about edibles, which are very popular with kids, why that's even an additional issue. So this is a graph looking at concentration of THC in the blood while you're smoking marijuana. And each one of these little arrows is a puff. So you can see puff, puff, puff. People tend to take larger drags in the beginning, and then they what's called self-titrate when they're at the level that they want to be, when they're as high as they want to be. And then after that, you can see that it drops off actually pretty quickly in the blood. Again, that's the detection issue. 90% of THC is out of your blood in the first 90 minutes after you're done smoking. But that's how it works when you smoke. Also, a quick note, see here, this was with a 3.55 THC joint. Again, compare that to what we have now and your ability to control. This next slide shows the difference between smoking, vaping, and edibles. So the blue and the green line, that's the curve that you just saw there. The black one there is an edible. And you can see there that the peak concentration is about 3 to 4 hours after you ingest it. So part of the issue with this, there's multiple. One is that you can't take anything back once you put it in. So unless you induce vomiting, when you eat an edible, it is in your system regardless of how high it's going to make you. There's nothing that you can do about it. Some people, even if they eat an edible and don't feel anything, might have more and then really put themselves into a state of, we'll call it acute intoxication. You can't have an overdose on marijuana in the clinical sense of like marijuana poisoning per se, where it could kill you, but it can make you very distressed and very cognitively impaired in a number of different ways. You can't self-titrate, and you're going to be higher though, potentially when you get in the car than even when you ate it. So it can hit you later on. The reason for that, well, even same thing with alcohol. If you drink on an empty stomach, you get drunk more quickly. We absorb chemicals through surface area of tissue. And so there's a lot more tissue available in the alveoli of your lungs than there is in your stomach, particularly if you're eating it in food anyway, because then there's food to help cover up some of it. So edibles in particular are really a big issue. And it absolutely impairs you. There's a lot of data I could show you about this, including car accident increases and claims increases, but this one I think is pretty telling with finger to nose misses. This one, controls have no marijuana in their bloodstream, and cases have it. And you can see an average of 5 finger to nose misses versus 0 for controls. The other aspect of this, it's critical, I was referring to earlier. What this means in statistics speak is that there was no clinically significant, statistically significant difference if it was greater than or equal to 5 versus less than 5 nanograms per liter. So that's speaking to the fact that we saw these finger to nose miss changes regardless of how much THC they still had in their blood. Another thing we hear about sometimes is it a gateway drug? This is another one of these things where people will say there's a debate, but for any of us in the industry, there is no debate because we've seen it a million times and the research supports it. So the only difference between the left group of kids here and the right group of kids here are whether or not they smoke pot. And this is for alcohol use, binge alcohol, heavy alcohol, cigarette use, and then other illicit drug use. That's 10 times higher there, those 2 different blue lines. Here it is for heroin specifically, marijuana no, marijuana yes. Here's 12 to 17. Here's 18 to 25. Here's 18 plus and 12 plus. It's pretty clear. Here's another one. This study came out about 8 months ago now, looking at recreational marijuana use and the chances of developing a new opioid painkiller addiction. People who had occasional use, this is 5 times higher. Occasional use of recreational marijuana, 5 times higher than people with no use, and about 8 times higher for people with frequent or very frequent use to develop this new prescription pill, opioid prescription addiction. That's very striking. And then lastly, 92% of people who use heroin have used marijuana first. Now that does not mean, of course, right, that if you smoke marijuana, you will smoke heroin. It doesn't move in that direction, or you will use heroin rather. But that's the way risk works, right? And the conduit for this, that the path for this is very easy to see, right? If someone approached you and said, "Hey, would you like to inject heroin today?" and you've never done anything illegal or intoxicating like that in your life, you would probably say no for a number of different reasons. But if someone, say in high school, says, "Hey," or maybe you're already vaping, you're vaping nicotine, for example, and someone says, "Hey, how about I put some wax in your jewel? How about I put something in your jewel? How you want to dab?" You might go, "Sure, I'll give that a try. Isn't it? It's natural anyway, right? It comes from plants. Might as well." Now you're using these substances, and certainly as kids, it's illegal and will be illegal no matter what happens with policy for kids. Now I am a person who uses illegal drugs to get high. That starts becoming part of your identity, something you do. Now it's a lot easier to take that painkiller pill from the last slide, right? If someone brings that to a party or a Xanax or something else, and eventually you can make your way to heroin. We see this story, we hear this story a lot. So to say that there's a debate about this, I think is very disingenuous. We can clearly see how this happens. There are behavioral and biological mechanisms for why this would be the case, and the data supports it. So that is another huge concern. So youth, again, target demographic. I think we've actually already talked about this, so we don't have to rehash it too much, but here's just some more examples of what we're seeing right now in Colorado with the lollipops. You can see there on the left, and they're actually designed, even, I'll try to magnify a little bit here, like those are peach rings, right? You can get those at movie theaters. And there's some gummy, those are like the cola bottles. It actually says cherry cola bottles. They're modeled after what's already there. And again, none of these that you're looking at here are in child-proof packages at all, not even a little bit. And this is what's going on right now. So most concerning, monitoring the future, a huge nationally recognized prestigious study going on right now out of the University of Michigan found that 1 in 4 12th graders said that they would try marijuana or increase their current use beyond what it currently is if it were legalized. And that is a very concerning statement. Straight from the horse's mouth, right? Straight from the kids, what they're saying. So when we think about the impact of these sorts of changes, it's very concerning. And lastly, just to put this in perspective, here is a past month of alcohol use, alcohol, marijuana, and cigarettes by high school seniors from 1975 to 2015. And you can clearly see the trend line for alcohol and cigarettes. But look at marijuana, right? It's been holding steady. And we've actually been seeing all drug use across the board for just about everything recreationally be going down for a number of years. The policies and practices that we've been doing by and large have been helping. But one of these industries is largely unchecked, and one of these industries is appealing directly to kids. And that's that green line. And so it's really not a mistake that one's held steady while the other ones have gone down. And we really need to pay attention to it. So in summary, marijuana is an addictive substance that's often misunderstood by adolescents. Again, there's a lot of misinformation out there. If they Google it, they're not necessarily going to get the truth. It's just not what they're being told. Marijuana is powered by an industry which targets youth and young adults with marketing and misinformation. Hopefully, if nothing else, you've seen that from what I've presented to you today, both in terms of from journal articles and also actual websites. And again, I encourage you, if you're in a state with recreational marijuana, check out what they're doing. Go to their website, go to their store. If you're in a state with medical, see who's got a website, take a look at it. All you have to do is look. and it can have very significant physiological, cognitive, and functional ramifications: driving, safety, sexual behavior, academic outcomes, a whole range of things. The longer, though, an adolescent can go before their first use, the better it is for them. So the more that we can help our kids understand risk and benefits, empower them to make active choices, to make healthy choices, and the longer that they can go before that first exposure, if they have it, the better off they're going to be in the long run. So now we're going to turn it back over to Mary Beth, and I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention today.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Let me just get everything set up from here. Okay, so while we finish up here, go ahead and submit your questions. I just want to go through a few slides, and then we'll come back to the questions. All right. So for those of you that are new to Operation Parent, we just encourage you to stay informed with us. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Sign up for our e-newsletter. Purchase our parent handbook. You can do that online. You can also purchase on bulk online. Host a community presentation where we come out and talk to your families, or continue to receive information about our future webinars. We do once a month, but we are also trying to move to twice a month on a variety of topics. Our next webinar is Hiding in Plain Sight on Tuesday, November 13th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time with Trooper Robert Purdy. He's from the Kentucky State Police. He does a great job just talking about what they are seeing with adolescents and when they are involved with confronting or dealing with situations where adolescents are involved. What are they using? What's going on? Where are they hiding it? So that they are really talking to the general public and parents in the situation. So I just encourage you sign up for that. You can do it at our website. We do have a calendar icon at the top right-hand corner. It looks like a little calendar. Click in there, you'll see the next webinar, and you can go ahead and sign up. These are our parent handbooks. You can find them on our website, and please take the time to check them out. Again, you can purchase in bulk or individual orders. So with that, let me just go in and see questions here. Hold on. Okay. Let me start. And if we run out of time, I will, Dr. Weiner, are you okay with answering some of these via email if we run out of time?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay, I really appreciate that.
And I should also mention, so my email is aaron.weiner@eehealth.org, and please feel free to drop me a line if you have any questions after this. I think that being able to have a good dialogue about this is incredibly important.
Thank you. So the first question is, how does marijuana use affect incidences of first episodes of psychosis? And I think you covered that.
Yeah. So I mean, if they're in conjunction, we found that they are positively related. We found some directionality that's showing that more and more that they may be causational. But the bottom line is it's not a good thing. It's not going to help at all. If anything, it's going to make it worse.
Okay. Here's a nice one here. We are part of your local community, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of that high school. It's WAUBONSIE, Valley High School.
Waubonsie, yeah.
Okay, it says, can you come out to speak to our students and help them get the facts straight about their brain? We feel like marijuana and vaping is a huge issue in our school. So
I'd be happy to do that. Drop me an email, we'll arrange it.
Question here is, will recording of this presentation be available? Yes, it'll come to your email whether you've attended live or you've missed it. It'll automatically shoot to everyone who is registered tomorrow, so 24 hours. Yes, you may share that link. We encourage you to share it with your communities. Is there any research about secondhand marijuana smoke? I work in a school where many parents are smoking in their home. How does that affect their kids?
Oh, that's a really good question. You know, to be honest, for everything I've read, I have not read anything about secondhand marijuana smoke. If you drop me an email, I will look into that, and I will be happy to. I'll be happy to follow up with you after I can sift through the clinical research on that.
Okay, Sharon, you were the one who posted that. I will shoot this question over to Dr. Weiner, and he will go ahead and respond to you. Great question. Can you talk more about CBD? What are the risks and are there benefits?
really good question. So cannabidiol is totally fine. I have actually, it's not actually illegal in any way right now. You can buy it in a lot of different states. It can be derived from hemp. It's not psychoactive. It's more related to some of the anti-inflammatory properties that people are mistakenly ascribing to cannabis as a plant. But right now, I'd kind of categorize it as there are some things that there's stronger evidence for it for others, like say seizures and multiple sclerosis, but it's probably not going to hurt you. So generally the way I look at CBD is as a substance, totally fine. If people want to try it for something, worst case scenario is it's not going to do anything for them, or they're going to have a really nice placebo effect, but it may also do something. So my only issue with CBD is that people oftentimes confuse that with marijuana, and they are not the same thing.
Okay. Can you touch on neurotoxicity regarding butane hash oils?
Yeah, so that's exactly, so the butane hash oil, you might actually, I think I saw an article with that title. It's very similar to the one that I had earlier in my presentation, where it can lead to those psychotic breaks. That's essentially what it's moving towards. So you can create these psychotic states more easily through butane hash oil is another type of concentrate or extract, BHO. So it's all the same thing.
Okay. Do you have any studies that show what types of education are effective for discouraging teens from trying marijuana?
Very good question. So I do not have any studies for it. However, what I have found is that teens don't like to feel like they're being taken advantage of. And so when you show them that they're basically being manipulated by the industry, that they're being marketed to, that they're being lied to, that they're basically being maneuvered into a place where they become dependent and socially conscripted in some ways to using a substance, that can sometimes get them to push it away because they want to be treated with respect.
Okay, great. I said there's one here. Vaping is a huge issue here. Hold on, it just disappeared. Hold on. Says I will be emailing you for information on a presentation. We did do a webinar just recently, just on the topic of vaping, not necessarily about marijuana, but on the topic of vaping. So if you're interested in getting that recording, I can send that to you, that link. Is there any research?
I was at that one. It was really good. It's definitely worth reaching out to Mary Beth about it.
Great, thank you. Is there any research
Yeah.
with people about ADHD and marijuana?
So ADHD and marijuana specifically, I don't know. Certainly as a treatment, there's no evidence I'm aware of. However, individuals with ADHD tend to be more impulsive anyway, and so overall their rates of drug use is higher because they're less likely to fully think through their decisions. Certainly from a self-medication standpoint, if someone's having trouble having a psychodiagnostic eval done or getting stimulants or Strattera, if that's more what they need, if they can't find a solution that works for them, sometimes people go to whatever they can find and whatever they can use. But in terms of it actually helping ADHD, I haven't seen that.
Okay. Well, it is right at 3 o'clock, and please know, I think might have been a few questions that we're not going to get to. I will send them right to Dr. Weiner, and he will communicate directly to you. Just going to honor our time limit here. I can't thank you enough for sharing this information. I think it was great, and I love seeing the sites and the sales that are available, the products that are available out for sale, and how attractive it is to our youth. So thank you so much for giving your time today and all of your information. And as I mentioned, there will be a certificate of attendance automatically attached to the email you'll receive tomorrow in the follow-up email for those that are attending live. If you listen to this recording, please send me an email at marybeth@operationparent.org, and I will go ahead and send you the certificate of attendance. Dr. Weiner, can you give your email address one more time?
Absolutely. It's Aaron, AARON, .Weiner, WEINER, at EE, so both of those are E in an elephant, as an elephant, EEhealth.org.
All right. And thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and close it out for today. And so appreciate everybody's time. And thank you again, Dr. Weiner.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Bye-bye.